Are you sheltering in place, isolated, feeling alone? Well, then you're just like us.
Hit me.
From Studio P in Sausalito, the home of the quarantined hit, it's time for... Succotash Shut-In, the Soundcast Stimulus Package featuring snippets from comedy...
Soundcasts.
And now, here's your host for this episode, Marc Hershon.
Howdy, chum. As the man says, I am Marc Hershon, your every other weekly host for Succotash Shut-In, the Soundcast Stimulus Package. This is episode 245, and this week I come to you semi-immune to the coronavirus, more commonly known as COVID-19. One shot down, one shot to go. I don't want to seem overly eager to get the next dose over and done with, but my wife and I are now starting to plan a getaway to Hawaii just to get the hell out of town for the first time in over a year. Switching gears, in case you missed my awesome co-host for last week's Epi245, you can still catch Tyson Saner and his lineup of Soundcast clips that included Mayim Bialik's Breakdown, Humboldt Holding Up, and Behind the Bastards. Find it on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, the Laughable app, iHeart Radio, YouTube, or right on our very own home site at succotashshow.com. I have no clips for you this week, but instead, a visit with Michael Rowe, who started out as a stand-up comedian, but who went on to become a comedy writer and producer for TV. Mike's been nominated for a half-dozen Emmy Awards for his work on Futurama and Family Guy, and he even took one home. He's also got a Webby Award for his own animated series, The Paranormal Action Squad. Mike's one of those guys with long roots in comedy that I should know. We have tons of friends in common. In fact, I was turned on to Mike by John Manfrotati, a friend and comic who was on Succotash a decade ago. Yeah, way back in episode 16. Mike's got a new book coming out, a memoir called It's a Funny Thing, How the Professional Comedy Business Made Me Fat and Bald. I'll jump into the conversation stream with Mike right after we hear from our sponsor, Henderson's Pants, and their new trousers that are just right for tax season, accountant pants.
Trusted friends, are you part of the 99%? With tax season just around the corner, there's no better time to hitch up your britches and occupy a pair of Henderson's accountant's pants. Created by Henderson's Pants CFO Samuel Grifter to keep track of the company's then meager finances right after the stock market crash of 1929, these trousers have a series of interlocking rear pockets made for storing and sorting receipts, invoices, and financial records of every kind. Perfect for day-to-day purchases as well as those one-time big-ticket items. Just pop the paperwork in the patented paper pusher in the back of every pair of Henderson's accountant's pants, and it is tucked away in the correct pocket every time. And these pants aren't just for keeping receipts in your seat. While you're taking care of business in the back, our deep pockets in the front are roomy enough to move all your money out of those giant banks and keep that folding green close to home. While there's no accounting for taste, you'll be cooking the books in style with your Henderson's accountant's pants. These trousers may be expensive, but even if you end up breaking the bank to buy a pair, they're made to tighten your belt automatically. And when tax time rolls around, there are no more forms to fill out. Just drop trow and send your Henderson's accountant's pants to the IRS. From now on, instead of giving Uncle Sam the shirt off your back, you can give him the pants right off your ass. Originally designed for Black Friday, Bernie Madoff, and national bankers who have trouble keeping their pants on, Henderson's accountant's pants are available wherever the 1% are making a mockery of capitalism. That's Henderson's, makers of fine trousers and pantaloons since 1783. And now back to Succotash.
Do you roll and cut, or is it live on tape?
It's pretty much live on tape, unless, there's some sort of weird technical breakdown or something like that. But yeah, I don't cut things up, and it'll just be our conversation. Let me introduce you. I may cut part of this, just sort of us doing a little bit of sort of upfront gabbing, but maybe I'll leave it. I don't know. But joining us on Succotash Shut-In is Mike Rowe. Mike, it seems like I should know you, because we have a lot of friends in common, I believe, through the world of comedy.
I know. Well, it's funny. I've been out of the stand-up world for a long time, and just been in the TV writing world since early '90s, probably.
Okay.
So, are you East Coast? I'm from the East Coast.
Well, that's why we have not crossed paths. I'm from the West Coast, and I'm not really from the world of stand-up, other than the fact I booked a lot of clubs up in San Francisco, and I ran a club in Seattle for a few years back in the early 80s. And I've been heavily into the improv scene since 1983. So
the LA improv, you mean?
Some LA, mostly San Francisco.
Oh, okay. I've never been there.
Oh, well, gosh. Of course, there was the heyday back in the 80s and early 90s before the whole sort of network fell apart.
Well, yeah, man, I was so in love with stand-up as a teenager, and I'm from a small town in Connecticut, Waterbury, Connecticut, a little factory town. So as a teenager, man, I got so obsessed with it. You know, I'm a teenager buying comedy records, or most of my peers at that time, they're buying, Frampton Comes Alive and Foghat, and I'm buying George Carlin and Richard Pryor, and and
what year is this, if I can?
This was 70. It started probably like 76.
So I think we're right about the same school then, same class in school. Because that's when I'm turned on to Monty Python about 4 years before that, when it sort of gets into the States. And my parents were huge on party records in the 60s, the party comedy records.
Red Fox and those types?
Red Fox, Bob Newhart, George Carlin. All those same records. So what lured you in initially? What was your first sort of seed that comedy started to call to you?
My dad owned this little shitty bar in downtown Waterbury called the Carousel.
Oh.
But it was like such a hole in the wall. But I hung out there. I was like 7, 8, 9 years old, and it was drunks and pimps and I was there usually during the softball teams, during the beer league nights. So my dad at one point had like 10 or 11 beer league teams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the thing was if the losing team would have to go to the winner's bar and pay for the drinks and all that. But so I hung out, I was a little kid, but these softball players were in their 20s. And I started to learn about their camaraderie through humor. We're all about making each other laugh. And I just saw the fun they were having. And as a kid, I was just mesmerized by it. And my dad was part of that. My dad dabbled in puns often. So it had a clubhouse feeling. And I was this little kid who was a member, and I felt great about it, And it also then, as you get older, it's like when you want to hang out with the cool kids, there's a good chance you have to like smoke and drink with them. And I just wasn't going to do it. But then I found out if I could make them laugh, they'd let me be part of that inner circle. So it's, I'm discovering the power of humor,
Yeah. And it's funny because in your book, which we'll sort of plug now, since it's sort of this part of the conversation, I'm thinking about this. It's a funny thing how the professional comedy business made me fat and bald. Mm-hmm. A comedy memoir. But you talk about, and I have not had a chance to read the whole book. You sent me a copy in advance. Thank you very much. Just been busy, but I have skimmed through it and stuff. And like I said, I feel like we should have run into each other somewhere along the way because of the folks you mention in the book. And you talk about hanging out backstage or in the street, as it were, in this one comedy club in New York. And it feels to me like the younger version of you telling that story, right? Hanging out at the bar with these people and being part of the inner circle and all this thing. So it feels like it's just sort of translated in time.
It was such an important time for me because I just, I was still a teenager when I moved to New York City, and this is 1980s New York, where it's crack and it's, there were transvestite hookers in my neighborhood. And as a kid, like there were men with breasts I couldn't understand, like on the street corners. It was very confusing. but it was kind of the same thing in a way, like my dad's bar, where now I'm at this club, the Improv, hanging out at the bar. And now I have my own little circle of funny friends and that camaraderie and that clubhouse feeling. So that was, it was like my home away from home. And Silver Friedman was running the club. She had just started then, and she made me feel at home. And so it was great. It was a fun time for me, and I was a kid, so it was great.
And then you make the leap to Los Angeles, and is it primarily to start doing improv or start doing comedy at that point, or is your eye on television already?
It had long been on television. In fact, since even when I was a teenager, you talk about, listening to comedy records and stuff, I used to get my little cassette recorder, and usually during the Tonight Show, whatever, I would record the comedians, and then just listen to them over and over and just, take the jokes apart and try to figure out why do they work and what's funny about them. I became this little joke scientist, and I would tell jokes to my friends. I'm 16, but I'm doing jokes about my wife and my divorce, and but Rodney Dangerfield was the guy for me, as a kid. And there was one point where he came on a Tonight Show. I mean, he was always on the Tonight Show. But this one night when he sat at the panel, Johnny got him to kind of be honest and be himself for a minute. And he talked about his life in Catskill Mountains and how he started as a comedian there and didn't do well. He went under the name of Jack Roy. Yeah. And then he talked about his club, Dangerfields in Manhattan. And then my brain started to think, if I wanted to get to Rodney, I can contact Jack Roy at Dangerfields, and he would pick up, or he would. But my idea was, since I knew his jokes so well, and since I've been studying them, I sat down, I got my mom's manual typewriter, and I typed out 2 pages of Rodney jokes. And then I sent them to Jack Roy at Dangerfields. And, I'm in my finished off panel basement. I'm 16 or 17, and a couple of weeks go by, and of course I don't hear anything, and I kind of forget about it. And then one night, the phone rings. My mom's at the top of the stairs. Mike, there's a Rodney on the phone for you. I'm like, what? What do you? And I'm like, hello. Hey, Mike, it's Rodney. How you doing? You okay? You all right? Hey, I'm like, you got your jokes. They're really good. I like them. These are good jokes, but they're not for me. I don't do these jokes. But and he instilled a certain confidence in me, because he kept me on the phone for 20 minutes and just saying, how it's going to take a long time to get funny if you want to do this. He told me about the showcase clubs in New York, and then even a week later, I got a handwritten letter from him saying, it took me 8 years to be funny, and, if you want to do it, get ready, So that was pretty cool. And that was the kind of thing that said, I'm going to have to do this.
What a shot in the arm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Did you ever meet him face to face?
Yeah, I eventually moved not long after that, a year and a half maybe. And I started writing jokes for him.
Oh, really?
And I would meet him during the day, I would meet him at his, at Dangerfields. He had a basement dressing room. And I didn't do it often, just a couple times, but, I just remember this one time, and I'm sitting there, I'm still a kid pretty much, I'm 18 or whatever, and I'm reading my jokes off the pages, and Rodney's pacing, and he's wearing this blue robe, and at one point I figured maybe I connected with him, because he just sort of stopped. I go, oh, finally something. And then he turns and starts peeing in the sink. Don't give me a toilet down here, I gotta pee in the sink, I go, all right, I'm in showbiz.
Wow. So you start writing for him. He literally bought jokes from you.
He would buy jokes from comics, $50 kind of the going price. There were a couple other comics. Rip Taylor, Rip Taylor?
Sure.
Rip Taylor, right?
Yeah.
He was 50. I wrote for him, I'm reading a good book, The History of Crazy Glue. I can't put it down. Hello.
That sounds like him.
That kind of stuff.
That's great. That's great. So what are you also performing at this time, or you're just start out by writing jokes for these guys?
No, I was doing stand-up the whole time because I was still in love with it, and just paying my dues and meeting a bunch of comedy friends and building that camaraderie. We didn't party. We stayed up late in the diners in Manhattan, like 2, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and just making each other laugh and going over our jokes and what worked and how do you do this and why am I not getting spots here and all that comedian sort of like grousing and laughing and eating and, there's a story I tell in the book, but this is true. Before I moved to Manhattan, I would take these improv classes at the Improv, and I got to know the guy that worked at the bar during the day. Mm. And at one point I said, I'm trying to move into Manhattan so I can start my career. And then he said he had a couch in his living room. And they said, if you want to stay there, then I'm like, I guess I'm moving to Manhattan, a free couch to sleep on, which, when you're 18, 19, that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, but I've been telling a story for years. In fact, when I worked on Futurama, I told Matt Groening this story, which I'll get to, but he made me tell it on the writer's ancillary, the writer's commentary on the DVD of one of my episodes. So it's just simply this, that, came home middle of the night and getting my hard, dusty couch ready to go to sleep that night. And he's in the room right on the other side. And as I'm about to go into the couch, he starts screaming. He's like, a ghost. Oh my God, a ghost. I'm like, what? What's going on? What? There's a ghost right there in front of you. I don't see a ghost. What are you talking about? Oh my God. Oh, it's a ghost. And there's like a pause. He goes, he's gone. Oh, the ghost is gone. And he goes, if you're scared and you want to come in here, there's plenty of room in the bed.
Oh, okay.
So that was his, and even my, 19-year-old brain didn't even register of what exactly was happening. It wasn't literally until like 3 years after I moved out, I was talking to one of the waitresses at the Improv who knew him, and I told her the story, and she just started laughing. I'm like, what? Well, he's gay.
So you're doing the stand-up thing, but you've got your eye on television. So you told me sort of what attracted you to comedy in the first place, but what is it that starts luring you to think about writing for television?
First of all, it was kind of fun writing for comics, and then even sort of helping my comic friends shape their act and seeing that happen. And that was interesting. But there was I hated going on the road, right? Doing stand-up. And I was 20, at this point I was probably 23 or 4 or so. And I'm starting to realize I don't have the fire in me to work that hard to become Robert Klein or Carlin or the people I admire. I kind of knew, who knows, maybe I knew my talent wasn't that. I mean, no matter what, I mean, you just kind of like, I just kind of knew if I don't like going on the road now at 24, what happens when I'm 50, Yeah,
and it takes that fire. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I, although I was working around and in stand-up comedy, I didn't want to do it either because your act had to become bulletproof to become good. And the only way I could get bulletproof is to go on the road and play in front of many different audiences as you can. Right? Try it in front around the country if you can manage to pull that off. And it is very daunting.
Right. And also there's a lot of bad habits you pick up on the road if you want to become sort of like a TV friendly comic. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think the road is a good place to learn how to develop because it seems like in a lot of cases, you kind of resort to, I don't know, the sort of a lower base, you kind of do what you need to do to get them to laugh. In other words, you're kind of building your act, I think, towards those crowds, but they're, at least in my experiences, they were just kind of drunks and, I don't know. Maybe that's part of my problem. I got to a point where I wasn't that interested in making people I don't know laugh. In fact, my act turned into just trying to make the comics in the back of the room laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And where does that get you?
Well, I guess television.
Yeah, that was it,
Worked for Larry David, and it's worked for you, so.
Yes. Not in the Larry David way, but,
That's okay. You've had a not immodest career at this point.
Yeah, it's, in truth, I certainly have done more and I've gotten further than I ever thought, when I won an Emmy, it was, I don't even think of it like, wow, this is going to make the doors open in the industry or any of that stuff. I didn't even consider kind of what it means in the industry. It was more of, it was a couple of things. It was like me as a kid when I started this business and having that kid-like view of like, hey, maybe I'll win an Emmy someday. The pie in the sky thought of that, but then to actually win it, it was sort of more emotionally interesting to me in that way, And
what did you feel when you won it?
What's that?
What did you feel when you won it?
It was kind of maybe what I imagined winning the Super Bowl ring. I don't know. It was hitting a goalpost, I think that's what it felt like. It was very exciting, and it was an interesting night because my dad and I, since I was a kid, we really bonded through comedy. We would laugh at the comedians, the old timers on TV, like Norm Crosby and Charlie Callis and Henny Youngman and all those guys. So my dad and I bonded through comedy. In fact, on his deathbed, his wife, it was like my last night with him, and his wife said to me, he goes, tonight read your dad the scriptures. And when she left the room, I put Henny Youngman jokes on my phone and read Henny Youngman jokes to him. That was our scripture.
Yeah.
But, actually on my dad's 60th birthday, and this is where he lived in a little smaller town in Connecticut, he had a party in his basement with, 60, 70 of his closest friends and family. And I hired Henny Youngman to show up at his party.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. And he it's funny too, because when I announced him and Henny came down the stairs in the basement, and my dad just didn't believe it. He probably just thought like one of my friends was going to impersonate him. And then he came down with the loud jacket and the violin and just went at it in the middle of the room. It was amazing. My dad shot up out of his chair and did a pirouette, and it was a pretty great night.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So part of the beginning of the book, you talk about pitching to this guy at the Disney Channel, or at Disney. I don't know if it was the Disney Channel, but at Disney.
Yeah.
And I had a similar situation pitching to, it may have been the same guy, quite frankly, at Disney. I had some success with some made-for-TV movies at the Hallmark Channel.
Okay.
And so I got invited to come and pitch at Disney, and I had this whole pitch about this kid who his best friend disappears for the summer. And when he comes back, he's a very different kid. It's like one of those kind of growth spurt things. He's like, a foot taller, and he's acting all kind of adult and whatnot. And it turns out he's been away in outer space, and he's been replaced by an alien, basically. And the guy just looks at me and says, "We do not have children taken over by anything on this channel."
Oh, wow.
that was the end of that pitch. But you're talking about that attitude of going on the Disney lot and seeing those giant dwarves holding up the roof, and walking the halls with all these amazing animation cells from the classic movies. What was that? I mean, talk to the sort of the listeners about what is that feeling like when you get there and you see that?
Well, even, to this day, when I'm kind of walking onto these historic lots or eventually working there, that kid-like feeling doesn't go away. You're like, am I allowed to be here? Is this right? Is this, to be part of these hallowed halls, and it in a way, it adds a little more stress and pressure, like if you're going on a meeting, because, you're in the museum of, great things. You're walking into history, and it's like, well, do I measure up to this stuff? I mean, this has been here for 70 years and, but then I eventually worked on the lot, I think a few times. So that was pretty great. And especially like the Disney lot and the animation building, the small one, a lot of those things have been untouched since it's been there, so Walt himself was wandering those halls and smoking at some point.
Yes. So, what was your first sale? What was the first thing you actually got paid for and then got produced? Because I think there's plenty of stories of selling things and then you never hear from them again. But
well, I was lucky. It actually happened before I moved to Hollywood. There was a Saturday morning half-hour cartoon of Alf. Remember Alf, the TV show?
Yeah.
So he had a friend worked. He had a friend of a friend worked on that show, and this friend knew that I wanted to write half hours. So I met with those guys, and I got to write. It was called Alf Tales, and it was Alf put in different fairy tales, Alf and the characters.
Okay.
And it was a half hour, and it got produced, and I think I got like $10,000 for it. And if you could imagine, I'm doing gigs for like the clubs pay $10, weekends it's $25, I'm making $300. I'm making my rent, that's about it.
Yeah. And working a lot, having to shuffle a lot, right? This is New York. So you're running back and forth on the weekends and stuff.
Yeah. And especially in Manhattan, there was a time where I think I did 11 shows in one Saturday night. Just in Manhattan.
And you feel you've made it at that point to a certain extent, right? As a stand-up, you're going, this is amazing. I'm everywhere.
I know. There's something, though, about the innocence of that and the fun of it, of like, I'm going to go do a gig over here. I'll get to hang out with some friends first while I'm waiting to go on. Then I'll meet up another friend at another gig. And there was all these sort of cool little places, especially in the Village, that I got to work at. There was the Comedy Cellar, of course, and there was the Boston Comedy Club in the Village, the Village Gate, the historic Village Gate. In fact, I had this cool thing happen. I'm like waiting to go on stage upstairs, and I'm in the kitchen, and I hear there's like this little door to the kitchen, and I hear like music coming out of it. I'm like, what the hell? And then I open the door, and it's just big enough barely for me to get in, and it's just like dark basement, and it's this rickety spiral staircase, and I make my way down, and I get down there. There's a show. There's probably 40 people, and it's Bo Diddley.
No kidding.
Just playing. I'm like, what? It was like walking into this weird dream or something. It's like, I just love shit like that, especially in New York, that stuff happens, those moments,
Yeah.
I used to work at the Bottom Line all the time and open for a lot of acts and just these great moments. I opened for Kenny G for a couple of nights, and Kenny G was really great at this time. I mean, he wasn't as soft as he became, and like jazz guys would come and see him play and stuff like that. But at the Bottom Line, in the back, there's a hallway. There's our dressing rooms, one on each side, and they're big dressing rooms. And the second night between shows, I'm in my dressing room by myself, and I look down, and Kenny G's got a big party going on. And there's hot women, and there's celebrities, and there's like a food table, and I'm like by myself, like. And I thought he and I were, hit it off. We were hanging out, and then I'm like in the doorway trying to get his attention. and then finally our eyes connect, and he's like, "Oh, Mike, oh," and he kind of jogs over to my door. He goes, "Mike, I'm having a party going on in my dressing room. Is it okay if I take a shit in here?" Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh man! Now, did you ever get a chance to open for any of sort of the comic idols that you'd listen to or run across?
Soupy Sales.
Really?
Because as a little kid, Soupy Sales is the first thing I remember laughing at on TV. And then later, when I moved to New York, I wrote for a show in New Jersey called The Uncle Floyd Show. Not many people know, but the Uncle Floyd Show was kind of very much like the Soupy Sales show, only for like stoners, and it was and that was my first writing job. But I had this thing about Soupy Sales that I'd never laughed at anything before, so that got to open for him. My moment with him was we're working at, I think, Rascals in West Orange, but it has this giant green room, and I'm like walking back there going, I'm going to meet Soupy Sales. I can't believe it. And as I walk in, the bathroom door opens and Soupy comes out, kind of holding his nose. He's like, "Hey, how you doing? I just took a big shit in here. Do you have any matches?" Why are all these
your run-ins seem to be about celebrities needing to use the restroom or having just used the restroom?
Rodney, I got Kenny G, I got that's a whole other book of people who shit around me. Yeah.
So, I mean, your book is rife with anecdotes, and we don't have that long of a show here. But is there, if someone's going to go, pick up the book, are there elements in here that you were really tickled to get to put down on paper that you go, man, I can't wait till someone reads this particular story?
Well, the kind of more interesting story is it's a long story, but I'll just tease it. But I went to a technical high school because I was deemed not college material. So I learned electronics, and then when I went to New York City, I got a day job repairing audiovisual equipment, and part of my job was to go to Times Square, 1980s, go to the porn district, into the porn theaters, and do maintenance on the projection equipment.
Okay.
And so in the book, there's the whole story of like what I saw in there. And again, I wasn't that too long off the Greyhound bus. Just a young boy out of Connecticut thrown into the underbelly of porno Manhattan. So there's those stories are fun. My hanging out with Martin Scorsese story. I'm teasing all these stories, but
okay.
in general, though, what I wanted to accomplish with this book is thinking about young people who are interested in like chasing their wildest dreams. The whole book is a journey of like what could happen when you kind of go up after these things that are kind of impossible. And it's not even necessarily show business. It's, but it's like, I can't imagine like if one kid reads this and like, maybe I can be in the NBA or something like that. You know what I mean? If it inspires them, even one kid like that, or why can't I be in show business? That was kind of the purpose of it. It's the older me talking to the young me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Saying, here's what's going to happen to you,
Yeah. It's interesting. There's the book also, it's got kind of the sort of some of the pitfalls you fell into in trying to get to where your path was taking you. And I imagine as you got further along, you got somewhat wise to the things that the younger you ran into, but how did that prepare you for things that you didn't know might be down the line as you were sort of getting more success in the business?
It's kind of hard, because I feel like I'm learning something all the time, even to this day. I'm still lucky enough to be working pretty much, so I feel like I feel like I there's no way I'm going to know everything I don't have everything figured out. In fact, it's almost like the more I know, the less I know.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
So I guess that's another thing. It's like as much experience as you have, you may be better equipped to deal with them, but you still don't know what, every time I get on a new show or sell a project, or sell a pitch or something, my next automatic feeling is, all right, when's the shoe going to drop? Some bottom is going to fall out, it's cynical, but it's, a lot of times that's what happens,
Yeah. I was going to ask something that just completely went out of my head, but it had to do with sort of going down this path. I know. I was going to. This actually is sort of taking another turn. And what's it been like for you during the pandemic in terms of jobs and what's going on with the industry right now?
In truth, it's been very productive. This is the most I've developed and pitched shows.
Oh, really?
Even though on Zoom, yeah. So I've been developing a lot of shows with other writers online, pitching a bunch of stuff, and writing a pilot. Now there's really no excuse, why you're not working. So in some ways, it's been helpful. I was going to buy a second car because we've always had a second car. And I didn't buy it, I figure it's going to sit in the driveway. So I'm stuck even more at home because my wife is working, but I'm finding it very productive, surprisingly. I think it's good. I mean, I have friends I see, once a week or twice a week. And we used to have this Tuesday night hangout at this bar in North Hollywood. And then eventually we just get together on Zoom every Tuesday. So there's 8 to 12 of us all being idiots on Zoom. And it also connected me to other comedians who have since moved away to other cities. And then we're all kind of back. So there's that. So it hasn't been horrible, it's been productive.
Do you think when these things lift, as they're beginning to open up now, that there's going to be kind of a opening of the floodgates of all these creative types that have been locked down for a year that have just been sort of churning out material and sort of not having that much of an outlet for it?
That's a good question. I feel like stuff was being written all this time and stuff has been handed in. And another concern is like there's probably just a lot of stuff built up on the runway that was supposed to go into production. So, the pitching so far we've been doing is I've been attaching studios. So I've been, the pitches have been to studios to say, come and join us on this thing. And then, so as I'm building the studios, we have yet to go into the marketplace. So I don't even know what to expect exactly.
That's interesting.
We did sell a animated Christmas musical.
Oh.
Jason Mraz doing the music. Nancy Cartwright, Bart Simpson doing voice, Allison Janney, and a bunch of other people,
Oh, that's fun.
But everything takes forever. I got like 5 or 6 things going, but I have nothing going. You know what I mean? They're all in different forms of development and redevelopment, but
you're staying busy, so it doesn't feel like nothing's happening.
Right. I mean, my job is sitting at my desk anyway,
Yeah, it's funny. I work for this branding studio full time up here in San Francisco, and we've been gone from the office literally a year this week. And so I've been working from home as everyone else in my office, and some of them are going crazy. They're used to being able to go in an office and have that sort of social thing that office workers have. But I've spent so much time writing on my own over the years that to me, this is second nature. Be at home writing, so it's actually not that big a deal. And you must feel kind of the same, that you're comfortable there.
Yeah. Now, how often do you do a podcast?
I started this podcast 10 years ago, And a couple of years ago, I just got tired of doing it. And it was mostly, I do interviews, but it's the main thing we do is we clip other comedy podcasts and just play them. I started it when podcasting had sort of had a gradual sort of mini rise in like 2005, 2006 with Ricky Gervais and people like that. And then it was beginning to die out. And I had a bunch of friends who were getting into it as comics, and I wanted to do one. And I said, well, what can I do that's different? And I said, well, why don't I just try and promote their podcast? So I just started clipping people's shows and doing like these clip shows. And then I started doing interviews with people, Manfrolotti, Rick Overton, Dana Carvey, all these people. And then a couple of years ago, I just kind of got burned out doing it, and it wasn't coming out very regularly. And as a podcast producer for a long time, it's like, you got to drop every week or you're just not going to develop your audience. And I had an associate producer that was doing most of the clipping for me. And I turned around and asked him if he wanted to host. And so he took over as host for a couple of years. And then when the pandemic came and they locked down, I read this figure that podcast listenership was beginning to drop.
During the pandemic?
Yeah, because no one was going to work. No one was going outside. They weren't jogging. They weren't going to the gym. They weren't on the bus. They weren't on the subways listening. And, it's not like the old Philco radio days where they're sitting at home with the family around a hot, podcast.
Right.
And so they were beginning to drop off because people weren't listening. So I said, well, let's just go back to what we started doing, which was to just promote these things and let people know what's out there. So he and I began switching off weeks just about a year ago. So we finally, after 10 years, been doing a weekly podcast for the last year, except we take turns hosting each week.
Does it help like socially, like, talking to people as sort of a way to help deal with the pandemic? Like through
it's really interesting to have these conversations with people, because people have handled it in some ways very similar fashions in terms of what they're doing about being careful and going out and staying isolated, but there's also very sort of different reactions to it mentally. Some people do feel like they're a caged cat and they just are going bananas. Other people, like you and I've been talking about, this is kind of second nature.
Right.
I like to go out and hang out with my friends too, but if I have to be here sitting behind my computer and doing some writing or whatever, that's okay.
Yeah.
I had a text conversation with George Wallace last week, and he's been locked down in Atlanta for the whole time because he's totally paranoid about catching this. And he's gotten both of his injections at this point of the vaccine. But he's been locked down at this condo he owns in Atlanta. And he was just totally scared. He goes, I go out to get groceries once in a while. But he says, I hate being locked up. That's the real dichotomy for someone like him.
Right. And, he's probably not a good case of someone who should get COVID. He probably may not do well. He's older and,
Yeah.
I was going to ask something. I forgot. Yeah, I forgot. I had something.
That's okay. That's all right.
I was going to say, the other thing I was going to say, that we were talking about how we're handling the virus and being at home. The thing I noticed, though, I've been visiting the liquor cabinet more often, and I'm also like smoking a cigar every day.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I would smoke one every 2 weeks or something, but now it's like it's become a ritual because it's something to do. I'll sit on the back porch and put on music and then smoke a cigar.
Well, it's a different routine for a different time. I mean, I've been trying to lose weight. I get out. We've got these hills here, out in this parkland, and I get out 4 or 5 days a week and do 4 or 5 mile run. But I went in for my checkup after not seeing my doctor for a year. He says, I thought you run like 5 times a week. I said, I do. He says, why haven't you lost any weight? I said, well, look at it this way. I haven't gained any weight.
I know, man. I can't even, it's so frustrating. I saw a documentary last night on weight, and it says ultimately what they found out is your body is fighting to the weight it wants to be from what it recognizes you should be genetically. So because I'm seeing a nutritionist and I keep asking him, like, how come, I eat as many calories as most people. And he's, he said, well, you're going to have to to lose weight. You got to be very calorie restrictive. I have to just work harder than most people. I'm like,
yeah. And the tough thing your body does doing that is it goes into like this starvation mode thing where it will hang on to every calorie that it can get for a while. So it takes a long time to push it over the edge and it starts coming off. I went on one of those, high protein, low carb diets, hardcore, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I lost a bunch of weight. I got down, I think I lost like 50 pounds. And it was great, but I felt like shit because I was just like, without carbs, your brain slows down. And the work I do, the work you do, you need your brain clicking as hard as it can go to get to that new level where people have not written something, or in my case, come up with a brand name that someone has not come up with yet.
Oh, it's funny you say that because I am on a low carb diet and I feel more befuddlement. I thought it might be due to age, or maybe it is, but
it may be in part, but it is because when I was on this hardcore thing, it was like 8 months, and I would go to work and I just go, I can't think.
It could be my newfound alcoholism. There's that.
That could be. I mean, seems like there's a number of factors at work.
That's right.
Well, Mike, this has been great. I would love to when things lift. I do get to LA very frequently when we're allowed to actually travel. I'd love to hang out with you and maybe revisit for the show, or just hang out with you and Manfrotati and have breakfast, or do something like that.
Get into a street fight of some kind.
That would be the best, of course.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for talking about the book. I have no idea what I've got myself into, and I don't know if anybody will buy it. People are buying it actually, but
Well, let's mention it again. It's a funny thing how the professional comedy business made me fat and bald. A comedy memoir by Michael Rowe. Obviously, you're going a little fancy here.
Well, I kept getting confused with Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe. In fact, I did a podcast and it wasn't until 5 minutes before that she realized I was the wrong Mike Rowe.
Oh, that's funny.
You can imagine that.
Because it's funny because, again, although we've not met or crossed paths, as soon as when Manfrotati had mentioned that you had this book coming out, I never for a second confused it with that guy.
That's because Manfrotati would never go near that guy. So there's that.
Even though he idolizes Mike Rowe,
that's right.
Dirty Jobs. So it's a funny thing. And we're obviously Amazon, other places people can get it.
It's at the publisher website, bearmanor.com.
Okay.
Bear as in grizzly bear, Bear Manor.
All right.
It's supposed to be on Barnes & Noble website, I think, too.
All right. Well, I'll put up a couple of links. We have a blog piece that accompanies our episode every week. So I'll make sure to link it to that.
Groovy.
And thanks for spending a little bit of time with us on Succotash, Mike.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks to Mike Rowe for taking the time to chat. That was actually recorded a couple of weeks ago, and I have now finished It's a Funny Thing. Very funny book. I think you'll enjoy it a lot, and it's available up at Amazon for sure. There's a link at our blog entry for this episode at succotashshow.com, and you can check around other places. I didn't see it at barnesandnoble.com yet, but maybe it'll be there soon. Tyson will be back with you next week for episode 246. I will return the week after that. In the meantime, keep your nose clean, your feet wiped, your teeth brushed, your hands washed, and your face covered while you socially distance. And if anyone asks if you've heard anything good lately, please do not hesitate to pass the succotash. Bill?
You've been listening to Succotash Shut-In, the Soundcast Stimulus Package, with your host, Marc Hershon. Brought to you by Henderson's Pants and...
Imagine your company's name right here.
Find us on the web at succotashshow.com, on iTunes, on Stitcher, on iHeart Radio, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on the Laughable app, and tattooed on your mother's rear end. You can hear us streaming and like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Succotash Show. Email us at tyson@succotashshow.com or call into the Succotash Skype line at our toll call number 818-921-7212.
That number again is 818-921-7212.
You can also upload clips from your favorite comedy soundcasts directly to us using our direct upload link at hightail.com/u/succotash. Production of Succotash is overseen by Joe Paulino through the auspices of Studio P Sausalito, the home of the hit. Our hosts are Marc Hershon and Tyson Saner. Our musical director is Scott Carvey. Our booth assistant is still Kenny Durgis. And until next time, I'm your loyal booth announcer, Bill Haywatt, reminding you to please wash your hands and pass the Succotash. Goodbye. This has been a Succotash Patch production.